Good morning. We're on planet Earth, third planet from the star called Sun. The place is Turkey and you're at Real Turkey channel. Every day we're making new improvements in our YouTube broadcast. For instance, we fired the entire camera crew and replaced them with AI, which achieved us 90% cost savings. You won't realize difference. And the presenter is also an AI. He's not as smart as the original one, but who cares? The program is all about bullshit anyhow. The most important improvement is, of course, we've introduced graphics, some of which are Turkish, but sufficient explanation will be given via Google Translation. AI, remember? I want to talk about Turkey's economic recovery. If you are the kind who read investment bank reports, I hope you aren't, but there are some people like that. After a rather prolonged recession, Turkey has rebalanced. That's taking care of its inflation and current account deficit problem, and is in the process of staging a rather robust recovery, sort of like me, muscular, manly. In fact, our government has penned in 5% real GDP growth for next year. To put this in a perspective, this year, in 2019, the expected growth rate would be 0%. So it's a magnificent leap forward. That's probably not too credible. Only Mr. Erdogan and his sidekick Berat Albayrak believe in the 5% number. But I investigated a broad range of forecasts from IMF to run by the Sky brokerage house. Consensus seems to be around 3%, which is still good coming from 0%. Nevertheless, I have doubts whether 3% can be achieved because the data that was published in third quarter, which doesn't necessarily belong to third quarter because of data lags, did indicate a moderate recovery. But the data I'm going to talk about today, the data which appeared over the last month, indicates to me that the recovery is stumbling. And in the winter, given the harsh winter conditions and rising inflation, Turkey might revert back to stagnation, which would of course make a recovery much harder in 2020. Let's start with October industrial production. Industrial production shows a strong correlation with GDP growth. Annual industrial production increased, but this is really the wrong way to look at it. It's month-on-month industrial production that makes a difference. And in October, it declined on a seasonally adjusted terms, 0.9% vis-a-vis September. Of course, it's a very volatile number, but if you look at 3-month moving average figures, the recovery in industrial production is not very exciting as well. To forecast industrial production in the coming months, we look at PMI indicators. There are two of those. In terms of November, neither the Istanbul Chamber of Industry nor the Musiad industrial PMI indices have shown significant improvement vis-a-vis October. Therefore, it looks like industrial production is going to stagnate in the fourth quarter and is not going to make a huge contribution to the GDP in the same quarter as well. The second graph you see in the broadcast is the October retail sales indexed or normalized in some term. You would see that after a 3-month rise, October retail sales in real terms have declined again, 0.2% month on month, which is really strange because inflation was falling and consumer incomes were supposed to be rising. And as I will tell you later in this broadcast, consumer loans were increasing very rapidly. So why in October retail sales in real terms declined even a little bit is a puzzle. And it is a harbinger of perhaps even a weaker consumption on the way. One thing that really bothers me is that the prevailing view that Turkey has overcome its chronic high inflation problem turned out to be completely wrong. If you look at November data, which I sketched here, the figures you see in the chart are core inflation proxies. You know, they're not exactly core inflation as Americans or the British would measure it, but similar to it. You would see a large spike upwards, then really a very sharp decline, but then fluctuations, and the last sort of like a fish hook shows increases. Inflation increased from roughly 8.5% to 10.5% in November. We'll close the year around 12% at CPI level. Even though the government forecasts 8.5%, I really haven't seen any forecast below 10%. It is reasonable to assume that in 2020, inflation will be 12% again and will eat up consumer budgets and will introduce more uncertainty to currency and investment decisions. The reason why inflation cannot be brought to single digits is extremely expansionary fiscal and monetary policy, and essentially a government that prioritizes growth over economic balance. It just doesn't believe that we need to beat inflation permanently before we can build the basis for sustainable growth. So that's one of the major negatives going in 2020. Most seriously bothers me is the next chart you see. It's in Turkish again. It depicts the unemployment rate. It is September unemployment data, but the way Turkstat collects data is actually, it's an average of the surveys conducted in August, September, and October. I'm just going to give you the non-farm unemployment rate. It's 16.4%. Youth unemployment over 26%. So even though September was a very good month for the economy because of the government bonuses, because it was the month after the distribution of government bonuses to 12 million retirees and the peak of the tourism month, employment has picked up very little. Remember, unemployment may increase along with employment because of the increase in the labor force. So employment did increase somehow, but it was very inadequate. In October, unemployment may decline 1/10 of a percentage point, but looking at other data such as Social Security numbers, Turkey's Employment Bureau, etc., I know at the end of the year, unemployment would not decline below the September level of 4.6 million unemployed in urban areas. What is scary is we have lost 800,000 jobs over the course of 2019, and the government claims through several incentives it has helped employ 1.3 million people. So the private sector must have shed 2 million jobs. Think about that. And we have consumer confidence, which is the next chart. It is in Turkish again. The blue line indicates manufacturing industry confidence, which keeps increasing amazingly, even though they are not making any sales. But consumer confidence is very volatile, and after a 2-month increase, it has declined again in December by 2 percentage points. That data is verified by Bloomberg HT, which is a private broadcaster data, which declined by 4 percentage points in December. The level is already low. I mean, the number 100 represents where the consumer is at the neutral line between being optimistic and pessimistic about the future. The December read was about 58, so they're already very pessimistic. And remember, 60% of Turkish output is produced by household consumption. If they're not feeling good, they're not going to buy more. At this point, the only thing that really drives the Turkish recovery, to the extent it exists, it's not a chimera, is the last chart you see. It is again in Turkish. It shows the credit growth figures. These are annualized 13-week moving average figures. This is how central bank measures credit momentum. Credit tends to be extremely seasonally sensitive and volatile. So this way, this 13-week moving average smooths these volatilities. End of the month effects, Bayram, that's, holiday effects, etc. You would see that there is a huge jump in consumer loans, most of it comes from state banks, which are really compelled to lend to anyone which comes by the bank branches. The private banks are participating only very moderately. And most importantly, for production, you need corporate loans, which are lagging way behind the consumer loan data. Year to date, corporate loans grew by 9%, which is less than the inflation rate. All this gathered shows to me that there is very little momentum in the economy. And of course, one may argue that the central bank has, since July, reduced the policy rate by 1,200 basis points, and monetary policy works with lags, so we should be patient for this credit effect to take impact on the economy. But even though that's possible, it's not very probable, because while monetary stimulus is effective and potent, Turkish fiscal deficits, excluding one-time transfers, will have reached 4.5% of GDP, which is a large number because we have very shallow financial markets to cover this deficit from. And a fiscal retrenchment is necessary. It's already coming through new taxes, such as this new real estate tax, which really sucks it to the rich people. So monetary stimulus will be mitigated by fiscal retrenchment or fiscal austerity, and as a result, the impact of government actions on the economy would be almost negative. All in all, I look at this picture, I don't see the economy accelerating towards the winter. I see it decelerating, or at best sustaining a momentum, and that momentum measured by third quarter growth rate is roughly 2%, which remains my forecast. You have just watched another broadcast of Real Turkey channel originating from Istanbul, Turkey, Northern Hemisphere, planet Earth, star system Sun, Milky Way, Northwest, just around the Aramco. Bye-bye.